Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here with my Punisher review. Just got done watching it only a few moments ago. And so normally I've started to do recordings with my webcam, but for whatever reason, the audio is not turning out right when I'm recording with my webcam with my mic. And yet I can record perfectly fine audio with non-video. Not entirely sure what the deal with that is, but I'm not tech savvy enough to know. So if anyone does, please let me know how to fix that. So, in the meantime, here's my Punisher review, just audio version. So, to be perfectly honest, going into Punisher, I was a little apprehensive, just because, one, Punisher's my favorite Marvel character, so already my expectations are pretty high, because I want this series to be great, but also because the most recent Marvel series just haven't quite been delivering, because with Luke Cage, I think that season started off really strong. Like, the first half of the first season, I thought was really good. And then it just trailed off and, you know, just really got sloppy and I don't know, it just turned into, like, a completely different show. And Iron Fist was just... to me, it just seemed like no one really knew what they were doing with that show. Like, the writers and the showrunner wasn't entirely sure what the identity of this show was supposed to be, which, you know, I've kind of gone into more detail with, you know, Iron Fist and Luke Cage in my reviews on those shows, if you want to check that out. And, of course, Defenders, which I thought was good and definitely did kind of make up for the lackluster Luke Cage and Iron Fist. But even the Defenders, I don't think quite lived up to the expectation that I think it should have had. Because this is basically the street-level version of the Avengers, and, you know, again, not to go too much into detail in, like, you know, a review of the Defenders, because I already did that, but basically, I just feel like a lot of these shows didn't need to be, you know, 13 episodes, and actually Defenders, I feel like, I mean, I don't know, like, it might have could have gone for a few more episodes, just because I feel like there were moments that felt a little rushed, but also just because, I don't know, maybe it came down more to some of the writing and the directing of the show, but there were just some times where it didn't feel like there really were, like, the stakes were all that high. Because I know, like, the Hand were trying to, you know, become immortal, or I guess, can retain their immortality and all that stuff, but then the whole battle for New York and all that stuff, it just... I don't know, it just never really felt that, I don't know, I guess, that big of a deal, really. And so with, you know, some of that going in, because again, I like Defenders overall, I thought it was pretty good, but moments like that, where, you know, they're really trying to play this up of, like, you know, the Hand and, like, the battle for New York, and the stakes were supposed to be super high, but they just never really quite, I don't know, delivered that. And so I was kind of afraid the Punisher would fall into this little slump of Marvel TV shows, and Humans, I didn't bother watching that because it looked awful, and apparently it was. So it doesn't seem like Marvel's had the best run of TV shows here lately. Even if some of them, like, I think, you know, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Defenders all did well enough view-wise. But it just doesn't seem like, quality-wise, they're on par with, say, the first two seasons of Daredevil and Season 1 of Jessica Jones, which are absolutely fantastic. But Punisher, I think, definitely brings it back up to a higher level, and it actually was different from what I expected it to be. Because on one hand, I expected it to be more of like an action series, you know, because a lot of the shows and movies in the Marvel Universe kind of they take the superhero genre and put it in and kind of complement it with something else. Like, you know, Winter Soldier was like a spy espionage thriller in the comic book world, and, you know, Ant-Man was like a heist movie, and, you know, Jessica Jones was like a psychological thriller, and so I was actually kind of expecting, like, half expecting Punisher to be kind of like almost like an 80s, 90s action TV show with the Punisher. And one part of me would have actually been fine with that, just because those were some of my favorite parts in Daredevil Season 2, is Punisher just going all out, you know, fighting gang members and stuff like that. However, I also wanted it to be more... to have more substance. And I think this actually delivered. Like, honestly, this show was kind of more of a slow burn, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Because, again, I was going into this show expecting it to be more of a just kind of, shoot 'em up type show. And this, I guess I just was pleasantly surprised that the writers and showrunner decided to take a more, kind of like rein it in a little bit and actually take their time developing this show. Because it actually is overall really well written and well acted. I like the cast and supporting characters and all that stuff. And so yeah, I actually was initially kind of surprised that there wasn't a whole lot of action compared to previous Marvel shows. But I think having finished the show, I think that works to its benefit because they could have easily fallen into that trap of, oh well, it's a Punisher, we don't have to really put a whole lot of depth and development into the show. We can just have him blowing things up and shooting people. And yes, that would have been fine to a certain extent. But again, I was pleasantly surprised and am pleased that they decided to not go with that direction and actually develop the characters and this story out really well. And even though they changed Frank Castle's origin from the comics, obviously quite a bit because obviously in the comics he was a Vietnam vet. But they had to modernize him, so again, that's totally fine with most of these comic characters, anyways. They're kind of meant to be, I guess, lack for a better word, like kind of reinterpreted or just kind of like put into the modern day, whatever the modern times may be. You can easily put Punisher, 50 years down the road or 50 years in the past, and his character will still translate. And so, again, that was totally fine, and I don't know, it was actually kind of more of a, I don't know, like those kind of conspiracy thriller movies or something like that, where there's a secret that the government has been covering up, and it goes super deep. It goes way up in the political chain, and there's only a handful of people who know the truth, and they're trying to exploit it and all that stuff. So I like the fact that they kind of, again, they took that route. Again, taking an already established genre, but then complementing it with the Punisher and this comic book, this subgenre of comic book movies and TV shows. So I think it worked out really well, and especially for a character like the Punisher. So I think overall the show is definitely has kind of reignited my, I guess, like faith in the Marvel Netflix shows. That hopefully they are going to continue to put out quality instead of just being like, oh, well, look, we got to throw in a couple more episodes there just to fill our 13-episode quota, which I don't think is also something they need to focus on. Like, I think regardless of episodes, if they've got a good story, then tell the story, whether it be 6 episodes, 8 episodes, 10 episodes, whatever. And Punisher, I think, overall does really good with this 13-episode run. Whereas even with, some of the better shows, like Season 2 of Daredevil and Jessica Jones, there were maybe either, if not full episodes, there were at least several moments throughout the series I think would equal up to the runtime of maybe an episode or two that I think could have been cut. And definitely Luke Cage and Iron Fist, there was a lot of filler that just didn't need to be there, and it just really dragged the show down. Whereas Punisher, I think they actually used the time pretty wisely, and even the moments that I think could be argued as filler, they at least serve a purpose. Whereas in other shows, not just the Marvel Netflix shows, but there are a lot of other shows as well, where maybe they have to reach a certain episode limit, and so they throw in a lot of filler episodes just to kind of just so that way they can meet that certain episode quota. And most of the time, the filler episodes, though not inherently bad, they just don't really contribute much to the overall story or even characters. Sometimes you'll get like a nice episode where maybe it doesn't continue the story in the long run, but it's at least a good moment for like a character arc or something. And so I think Punisher does a really good job in telling the story in a 13-episode run with not, they stay pretty much on point. Like, they don't really detract all that much. And again, even when they do, and I say like it's arguable just because overall I would say that there really weren't any filler moments. and the moments that could be I don't know, argued as like filler, like dealing with Micro's family. I think those were actually necessary to kind of humanize Frank Castle a little bit more, because I guess minor spoilers if you all have not finished Punisher. He kind of ends up watching over Micro, who he reluctantly teams up with, again, trying to expose this truth about basically the people who had Frank Castle's family murdered also were involved with Micro, David Lieberman. Like, basically, they're going after the same people, so they kind of reluctantly team up. And so basically they start to go after David Lieberman, also Micro, aka Micro's character's family. And so Frank kind of gets close to him so that way he can kind of keep a close eye on him and all that stuff. But I think the relationship that he has with the family is actually, it's a good way of showing the Punisher is not just like this cold-hearted killing machine that he sometimes is depicted as in the comics. And again, sometimes that's fine that he has those moments where he is just a killing machine. But at the same time, to make him more sympathetic and to make him more of a compelling character, you have to add more to him. And I think those moments kind of really helped flesh out his character and show that, yeah, he might have some questionable, he might be doing questionable things, but he still has some sense of morality, and he does have, like, some kind of code that keeps him from kind of going full-blown, like, okay, yeah, this dude is definitely a psychopathic killer, and you can't even really side with him even as a vigilante or anti-hero. But I think this show does a really good job of showing that Frank Castle is very much kind of the quintessential anti-hero, where he wants the best possible things, not just, obviously he wants revenge to the people who killed his family. That's obviously his top priority. But in the process, he still wants, kind of truth and justice and stuff like that. But he's kind of given up on the whole, system and kind of takes it upon himself to do it his own way, for better or worse. But again, he still has his code, and he still has some morals that keeps him in line, and again, it makes him a lot more compelling of a character. Because there are moments where he has to restrain himself from just outright killing people when he's, in a firefight with police officers and stuff like that. So that way because he is aware that, yes, the public perceives him in a certain way, but he doesn't want to make it worse for himself, or just, pointlessly kill people who don't really deserve it, or who there's just no need to kill this person. So he tries to, take them out without the use of, murder. So yeah, overall, this show, I think, honestly surprised me a little bit in how good it actually is, and kind of more intelligent and well-written it is than what I would have expected. And I think this is also something that was missing from some of the Punisher movies, where even though I like the 2004 Thomas Jane Punisher movie well enough, and I like certain aspects of the Punisher Warzone movie, like the movie itself is terrible, but I do like Ray Stevenson, the actor who played Punisher, and I think he was a really good choice. But again, that was more of like the kind of cold-hearted, he's dead inside, and he's just out for revenge, and just, is a killing machine. So I like the fact that, like, I don't know, I guess the movies take certain aspects of Frank Castle and the Punisher, and they do certain things right, but then other things, they're a bit lacking. But I think this show is a really good balance of showing the duality of this character, and just the complexities and the nuances of, Frank Castle and the Punisher. So yeah, I'm actually very pleased with this show, and I think it's too soon, because, again, like, I just got done watching it 15 minutes ago, so I can't say for sure, like, if this is my all-time favorite Marvel show, or, where it ranks with, between Daredevil seasons 1 and 2 and Jessica Jones, because those are the best shows up until Punisher. So I think, give me a little bit more time, and I can probably more accurately rank Punisher with the other shows. But it definitely has kind of restored my faith that Marvel can still tell good stories. Again, whether it be 8 episodes for the Defenders, or 13 episodes like Punisher. Although I still think that most of these shows could easily go 8 to 10 episodes and would be perfectly fine. It would be a lot more tighter story-wise and less filler. But again, it all depends on the writers and the people involved. And clearly, the people involved with Punisher did a really good job, and I think they understood the character well. So, yeah, that pretty much wrapped this up, but I do also like that they've set up one of Punisher's, I guess, few villains in his rogues gallery, because obviously he doesn't have a very extensive rogues gallery because he kills the people he goes up against. One of his few kind of recurring villains is Jigsaw. So I like the fact that the character Billy Russo in the show they're basically setting him up to be Jigsaw later on, because honestly I'm not that familiar with the character from the comics. I remember he was the villain in the Warzone movie, but that's about it. And so the name Billy Russo sounded familiar, but honestly I'm still not even sure if that's the name of the Jigsaw in the comics or whatever. But I don't know, the last episode, there are moments where I'm like, hold on, are they trying to turn him into Jigsaw? And then sure enough, that looks like what they're trying to do. So I like the fact that they're setting him up to be a future villain, whether he's going to be, a villain for Punisher season 2, 3, and however many seasons they want to do, or if he's just going to be a recurring villain, kind of like how Kingpin was in Daredevil season 2. He wasn't the main antagonist, but he definitely has a presence, and he's there. And also, I'd kind of be fine if that's what they relegate Billy Russo's character to in future Punisher seasons, however many they do. Is he doesn't necessarily have to be front and center as the villain, but as long as he has a presence and we know that he's lurking around and plotting evil things, I think would be perfectly fine. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this review. I rather enjoyed this show. And I don't know, I wanted to try and keep it short, because otherwise I feel like I would just kind of ramble. So obviously I didn't hit a lot of the major plot points or anything like that in this show. But yeah, overall, really good show. Again, I like the pacing, I like the supporting characters, and the cast and acting. Pretty much everything was pretty exceptional in this show. Can't really say there were really any nitpicks or anything like that. It was a pretty good job bringing this character to life, or further bringing this character to life and kind of furthering his story from Daredevil season 2. So hopefully you all have enjoyed this review, and let me know what you all thought in the comment section below. And then also, before I wrap this up, as always, you can check me out on Twitter at IrishmanJake. I will leave links in the description below to social medias, and also I'm back with the Shogun's Gateway to Anime podcast. We're on a bit of a hiatus, but episode 8 is up. I'll leave a link in the description below as well if you all want to check that out. We're basically, it is a podcast where me and my host Will talk about all things anime. We recommend different anime series, kind of rate them, review them, and so it's kind of, episode 8 is kind of a recap on series we've been watching since we started our hiatus, and kind of series we are currently watching and recommend to you, the listeners. And then, of course, also started another podcast here on the YouTube channel where basically me and some friends or guests will just get together and talk about some of our favorite traveling experiences, whether it be international, domestic, what have you, and just, talk about our experience traveling wherever it is we went to. Episode 1 is currently on the channel. You can check that out, where basically my guests had talk about their experience taking a road trip across the U.S. It was actually really interesting and a lot of fun to have them on. So I plan on doing that just every now and then, and hopefully soon. The Pacey Pale Roundtable podcast will be up and running, although probably won't be super active until after the holidays, once we're all a bit more free with our work schedules and all that stuff, and then we can have that back up and running, because it's been several months since we last did that. And also did a Justice League review that is currently up on the channel as well, so you can check that out. And I think that's pretty much everything. So until next time, everyone, cheers.